Hi, today we are drawing our fall pumpkin. We're going to use curves and dashes. Today I only need two colors. I need brown to draw my pumpkin with and green to draw my leaves with. I have my thick, heavy-duty art paper, and I'm going to think about my big curves for my pumpkin. I'm going to do a curve around each side and then several curves on the pumpkin that show contour lines. Everyone say contour lines. Contour lines are how we show that an object is 3D when we're drawing it on a 2D surface. I'm going to begin with my brown crayon and I'm going to draw a large curve to the right. That's the right side of my pumpkin. It starts at the top of my paper and goes around to the bottom of my paper. Then I'm going to make a curve to the left. There's a dimple or a bit of an indentation at the top of my pumpkin. That's where the stem would be. That's where the pumpkin grew from a vine and started as a flower and developed into the large vegetable that it is. Now that I've done the outside of my pumpkin, I'm going to do three large curves. 1, 2, 3 curves on the right, and then I'll do 1, 2, 3 curves on the left. Now in first grade, we all got to go to the pumpkin patch, and some of us got big pumpkins, some of us got medium pumpkins, and some of us got small pumpkins. So we know pumpkins are all different sizes, and no two pumpkins look exactly the same. Some are a little squished on the side, like mine is. Some are pretty round, and some don't look like a sphere at all. You might have more than 3 ridges or less than 3 ridges. That's okay, but make sure you have these ridges because in art, the contour lines are how we show that a 3-dimensional object can be represented on a 2-dimensional paper. And it shows the roundness of that object. Once I'm done drawing my pumpkin in brown, I'm going to get my green crayon and I'm also going to use curves for the leaves. I'm going to do a curve in each corner for each leaf, and later on, after we finish painting our pumpkins, we're going to cut these out and glue them together. So right now, my leaves don't need to touch my pumpkin. What my leaf needs is a curve, and some dashes. The dashes are the veins of the pumpkin. Everybody say the veins of the pumpkin. What else has veins? People do. Dogs do. Any animal does. The veins carry blood and nutrients from our heart out to every part of our body and back to our heart again. And for a plant, the veins move water and minerals that the plant needs from the roots all the way out to the leaves. So it's important that our leaves have veins. That looks great. The last thing I need to do is write my name at the top. Then we're going to paint these, cut them out, and add them to our background. Hi, today we're going to paint our fall pumpkin. Last week we drew the outline of the pumpkin with crayons. We created big curves starting from the top and going all the way to the bottom. Then we used curves to draw 4 leaves in each corner and add dashes for the veins in the leaf. Today we're using tempera cakes and we're going to paint. We're going to start with the yellow. So in order to paint with the tempera cakes, I have to dip my brush in water and then I have to rub the paint off the cake. At first, you're going to have to rub it a lot to get the cake wet, and you will see the yellow start to appear on your brush. We're painting yellow first because yellow is the lighter color. Once we put the red on there, it's much darker and it's going to compete with the yellow since it is darker. I am just painting inside of each one of my curves. I get some more water and I wet the cake of tempera paint and I'm spreading it out. I don't want it to get too watery. This is not watercolor paint. I want to keep the paint pretty thick on my brush. So when I get water, I rub and rub and rub until I don't see any more water, but I see a lot of yellow on my brush. Then I'm ready to add that yellow to my pumpkin. I'm going to go over it all with yellow first, and then I'm going to come back and add red down each one of my brown lines and use that red to mix with my yellow and make orange. Everyone say red and yellow make orange. Red and yellow make orange. Now, in the example on the left-hand side of the board, you can see that there's a moon, and that pumpkin is done at night. So one side of my pumpkin is going to be lighter than the other side. One side is going to have the bright yellow that shows the reflected moonlight. Every time I want to get paint, I dip my brush in the water, and then I rub the tempera cake. Everybody say tempera cake. Until my brush is very, very yellow, and then I'm ready to add that paint. I can even leave a few white streaks showing through because on one side, as I said, I want it to look lighter. Now I'm going to add some red. So let me dip my brush, and now once I've wet the red very good, I have red on my brush. Let me start by going down each one of my brown lines, and I want to go back and forth a couple times and start to mix that yellow and red and make orange. But I'm always going in a curve. I'm going to draw down each one of my lines and then go back and forth in a curve. I see orange. Now along each one of those lines, I need for it to be really dark red along each one of those lines, but in the middle, a lighter orange. So I can just go back and forth with my curves, but down that brown line, I want a nice red stroke because that's showing the shadow. And I can do the same thing over here. It's okay if I go outside of the lines because we're going to cut this out. So if you go outside the lines, that is okay. So I can see I have some dark red in places, some lighter orange, and the yellow even shows through in some places. All of that is good. So I'm mixing that red with the yellow, back and forth, back and forth. Ooh, I can already see this side of the pumpkin is going to be the lighter side. You also should pick one side to be the lighter side. In the example picture, it's the left side. Just go down that line, and then I stroke back and forth in a curve. Make sure you don't have any pools of water or pools of paint. Spread it out and always move your brush in a curve on this pumpkin. That shows the contours or the curves, even some streaks like that, where the paint separates are good because real pumpkins have that look to them. And I'm going to get just a little water this time and some very dark red and go back down each one of my brown lines one more time. And that creates shadow. That's what helps my pumpkin look pretty 3D. Those shadows and then the light places also. Lots of curves. Great, so I'm all done painting my pumpkin. Now I'm going to paint my leaves green. Let me rinse my brush, dry it off some. Now I need to wet the green paint. Remember, you have to get it pretty wet at first till your brush is loaded with paint. Once I see my brush is loaded and it's green, I can paint my leaves. It's okay if I go outside of the lines because I'm going to cut those leaves off. That's how I'm going to add them to my picture. I will cut them off later. Now leaves also are not usually just one solid color. So we're going to add a little bit of yellow to our leaves. I'm not going to color the whole thing yellow. I'm going to paint the whole leaf green. And after I paint the whole leaf green, I want to come back and just add a little bit of yellow. See, once I get my tempera cake wet, I don't even have to keep adding paint. I don't have to keep adding water to get the paint. Now let me get just a little yellow. And I'm going to go down my dashes and outline the edge with yellow. So I'm not painting the whole leaf yellow. I'm just going to go down my dashes and along the outside. I'm creating highlights. Highlights are when an object reflects light and it looks lighter than the rest of the object. So parts of my leaf will be lighter and parts will be darker. Hi, today we're working on the background of our fall pumpkin. As you can see, I've chosen blue because our pumpkin is going to be at night under moonlight and starlight. We've already drawn our pumpkin and painted our pumpkin, so let's work on the background. Today we're using 3 colors. We're using green, we're using brown, and we're going to use some white construction paper crayons. I need to start by making the field for my pumpkin. Where does my pumpkin grow? Well, it grows in a pumpkin patch. So in the pumpkin patch, I can see lines of brown, and that's where each pumpkin was planted. They grow in rows like a lot of food does. So I'm adding in lots of brown curves that show the hills of the farm and the rows of the food. And in between, I want to add some green. So I'm going to take my green crayon and hold it on its side to do some green in between my brown rows. Now this is at night, so the blue represents darkness and shadow. So I can see some of my green and some of my brown, but then I also see a lot of darkness. I'm using the side of my crayon so I get some different colors and textures in my work. And a lot of you guys in first grade got to walk through a pumpkin patch. So you already know the pumpkins grow in rows and that there are greens and browns on the ground. After I've done that, I'm going to add in some stars and my moon and some clouds. So I'll use my white construction paper crayon. I'm going to put the moon up here in the right corner, and I'm not going to do the whole moon, I'm just going to do part of the moon. And then use the side of my crayon to color it in. Now that moon is shining bright light down onto the farm, and it's shining bright light down onto the pumpkin. So in my rows, I can add just a little bit of white next to each brown line. That means I have shadows and I have highlights. Everybody say shadows. Everyone say highlights. Highlights are where the moonlight is being reflected off the bumps and the hills on my ground. Now I want to add in some stars. Oh, but wait. Before I do my stars, I want to do some clouds. So I'm going to do some zigzags in the sky with the side of my crayon. Now I'm not trying to draw a bumpy line, fluffy white cloud that you would see on a pretty summer day. I'm going to do some light clouds. I'm going to start on top of my moon and do a few zigzags in the sky. I'm not trying to fill my sky up with clouds. I'm trying to make them look very wispy and thin as they're drifting in front of the moon. So there's a few clouds in my sky. For the stars, you could either draw 5-pointed stars, like the ones in the example done by a student on the left-hand side of the screen, or for your stars, you can just draw small circles in the sky. That's what I see when I look up at night and I see stars. I see small circles in the sky. Sometimes they're close together, and sometimes they're very far apart. Some are small, and some are big. And that's all I need for my stars and my moon, my clouds, and my pumpkin patch. The next thing I'm going to do is cut out my pumpkin, glue it down, and draw my spirals. The spirals are the loopy lines that connect the leaves to the pumpkin. Hello, today we are going to build our composition. Everyone say composition. Composition is when an artist puts together all the pieces of their work to make a whole picture that has balance and unity. All the parts need to work together to make the whole thing look good. We have our background. It's our pumpkin patch at night with stars and the moon and clouds. We have our pumpkin painting. Now we need to cut it down. After we cut it out, we're going to find a good place to glue it. Then we're going to cut out our leaves and glue those, and then add in our stem and our spirals. So let's look at our scissors. In the art classroom, all of our scissors have a small hole, that's for your thumb, and a big hole, that's for 2 or 3 fingers. When we cut, we always cut away from ourselves. Say, away from me. I cut away from me. I turn my paper. I cut away from me. So always keep your scissors pointed away from your body. Here's what I mean by turn your paper. I'm going to follow this brown line all the way around the edge of my pumpkin. I'll start right here at the bottom. And so as I cut, I want to leave the brown line. I want to see the brown line as I go. And notice when it's time for me to make a curve, I turn my paper. I cut away from me. So I don't ever bring my scissors back so they're pointing towards my body. I always cut away from myself. I turn my paper. I cut away from me. I turn my paper. I cut away from me. I turn my paper. I cut away from me. And then I finish right where I started. Now, when we painted our pumpkin, we had to pick one side to be the lighter side. I think my lighter side is this side. So that's the side I want facing the moon. I'm trying to find a good place for my pumpkin to sit. That's pretty high. That's a little too low. I think I want my pumpkin to sit right about there. And now I need to cut my leaves. I'm going to follow my green lines. I turn my paper. I turn my paper. I cut away from me. And I'm going to start thinking about where my leaves will go. I turn my paper. I cut away from me. Scissor safety is very important for us to remember. I turn my paper. I cut away from me. And remember to clean as you go. Everybody say, clean as I go. That means put your scraps that you cut off into the gray bucket. I turn my paper. I cut away from me. And anytime I'm not using my scissors, I always make sure that they are closed and flat on the table. We never spin our scissors. We never leave them open because someone could accidentally get hurt. So make sure you close it. I'm going to add my leaves in just a moment. Right now, I need to start with the piece of my art that I'm emphasizing, my pumpkin. I have to make sure my pumpkin's in the right place. Today I'm using a glue stick. I want to twist it up so just a little bit sticks out at the top. Don't twist it out too far or it will break off and your glue stick will no longer work. So let me turn my pumpkin over. I want to make sure I go all the way out to the edge and then curve back and forth over the pumpkin. I might need to twist up a little bit more glue. Make sure you go down the edges and get as close as you can to the edges of the pumpkin. I'm going to go around the outside edges one more time to make sure it has lots of good glue. Then, when I turn it over, let me find my place where I want it to be in my composition and then stick it down. It's also a good idea to do a corner check. If any corners or parts of your pumpkin pull back like this, add some more glue right there on the blue paper and push it down. We want our pumpkin stuck down very good. Now I'm going to do the same thing with my leaves. I'm going to space my leaves out around my pumpkin. They can be close to the stem or they might be a little bit further away. We're going to connect them all with spirals. So here I go. On the back of each leaf, I'm going to go around the edge and make sure I get that little corner part. I'm going to put my lightest yellow leaf close to the moon because it has a lot of highlight color. I have another very light yellow leaf. I'm going to put that on the side with the moon too. It has a lot of highlight. Everybody say highlight. Highlight is when an object reflects the bright light from the moon or the sun. I'll add that one there and glue it down. My two darker leaves are going to go on the left side of the pumpkin, away from the moon. They have more shadow. Everybody say shadow. Shadow is when an object does not have light on it. We see the darkest parts of it. And there are my leaves. They look like they're floating in the air. Make sure when you finish with your glue, you twist the glue back in so you can see the white around the edge and put the top on very tight. I can hear mine snap when I put it on very tightly. Now I need to use my green and my brown construction paper crayons again. I'm going to use my brown to draw a short stem. I use the shape of a rectangle, but I let it lean to the side a little bit. That's my stem. It's a pretty short rectangle. And then I want the spirals that connect the green leaves to the pumpkin plant. To draw a spiral, I go around and around and around and around and around and around. They don't have to touch the stem, but they might. Or around and around and around. It might go behind the pumpkin to where the plant is. Everyone say spiral. And that's how I make my spirals. And that's my pumpkin at night. I can't wait to see how yours turns out.